A few days ago, I accidentally locked myself out of my house after having gone out for groceries. When I returned to my home and found the doors locked, I quickly Googled and contacted a local locksmith. I had groceries which required freezing and a dog inside, two things which prevented me from shopping around for a reputable locksmith. I merely selected and dialed the first decent-looking one that I came across. I was given a reasonable quote over the phone and also a time at which to expect the locksmith. However, nearly 2 hours passed before he showed up. His truck was unmarked and presumably his personal vehicle, and his clothes were similarly plain. There was nothing to associate him with any service or company. He was nice enough, though, and even apologized for his lateness, although an explanation wasn't offered. He fiddled with the door for a moment, retrieved some tools, and went to work. A few minutes and a change of tools later, he opened the door. It was fairly hot outside, so I went in and grabbed a water bottle for him. He graciously thanked me, and then we began the payment process. I've been somewhat annoyed at his lateness, but the quickness of the actual unlocking of the door and his politeness had made my bad temper simmer down. But then he told me the job total, and I again became annoyed. It was well beyond the amount quoted over the phone, and having little time to waste, I accepted and confirmed the payment, then went inside. The total had been $200. I had had plans that day, so I put the incident in the back of my mind and went about my business. The following day, while relaxing and browsing stuff on the internet, I remembered the cost of the locksmith job, which had all but drained my wallet. I Googled locksmith services in my area and even contacted a few of them, and came to the conclusion that I had been ripped off, considerably. The job had been during regular operating hours, the locksmith had been late, the method he'd used was amateur, likely to cause damage to the door, a risk I was not forewarned about, and he wore nothing which identified his company. In hindsight, everything about the experience was unprofessional. Luckily, or so I thought at the time, the third-party payment service they used gave the option to dispute the charge in the link provided in the text receipt. I selected it, and after briefly explaining my situation, I was contacted by a customer service representative, but despite the option to dispute the charge, she couldn't actually facilitate a refund of my money, only tell me the information I already knew, that being the phone number of the locksmith service I'd used. Annoyed, but not deterred, I called the locksmith company and explained the situation, whilst politely but firmly demanding at least a partial refund. But not only did they deny me a refund, they said the rate was fair because, and I quote, "We got you inside, didn't we?" I explained to them that they had ripped me off, provided them with quotes from other companies for the same job they'd performed, but they remained indignant. In a moment of frustration, I said that I wasn't afraid to take them to small claims court. And to this, the phone operator responded, "You do what you gotta do. We'll do what we gotta do." Then hung up on me. I was too angered at the time to be unsettled, so I didn't really consider the parting statement to be a threat until later that night, when my frustration had dissipated with the arrival of nighttime, when I usually relax, watch TV, and reflect on the day. The man's words had become reinterpreted as a threat when I realized that I was dealing with someone who was probably unlicensed and unregistered, beyond Google ad posting, someone who by trade could enter a home soundlessly and with ease. I wouldn't say that I'm a coward or scared easily, but I do know when to be sensibly cautious. It was around 8 p.m. when this revelation came to me. I didn't have any weapons in my house, at least things intended for such a purpose, so I went to a neighbor's house, a trip that I hadn't ever taken since moving into the neighborhood some 6 years ago. Since we were essentially strangers, I tried my best to represent my situation in a way that would warrant his interest and support. I explained what happened, admittedly dramatizing the phone call to suggest the locksmith would be prowling around the area, rather than targeting my house specifically. I also emphasized the truth, that I had essentially been scammed by an unprofessional, something I think everybody can sympathize with. The neighbor is an old man, but not old enough to be totally unwelcome of strangers and their problems. He agreed that I should probably have some sort of greater protection in my home than some cooking and gardening tools, even if the locksmith was just making empty threats. I was elated, and thought I'd soon be loaned a proper weapon of some sort, but after re-entering his house for several moments, he returned not with a weapon, but with a candle. He handed it to me and said, "Before you sleep tonight, light the candles someplace near an exit of your home. Anyone, doesn't matter. Make sure that you don't inhale the scent emitted, and rest assured that any trespassers on your property will be swiftly dealt with. You needn't worry about cleaning up or anything like that. All will be taken care of." He shut the door without further explanation, leaving me standing on his front porch holding a candle the size of a whiskey glass. I returned home and set the candle on the kitchen table. It was the first time I'd had any face-to-face interaction with a man, and despite his bizarre assistance, his behavior didn't appear to be that of someone who had succumbed to senility. But of course, I was not ready to be reliant upon a candle for my safety, so I packed up some tools and brought them with me upstairs and made sure the doors were firmly shut and locked, as if it mattered given the circumstances of my caution. I'd even briefly considered placing obstructions before the door, but found this to be a bit silly to perform. I'm not a superstitious person, and I wouldn't have even then said that the candle had any relation to superstitions or the supernatural, but I did go back downstairs and light it. Who knows, I thought. Maybe it'll deter intruders with some awful smell. Maybe that's why he told me not to inhale the scent. I followed the man's instructions and quickly left before the flames reached the topmost layer of wax. The following morning, I received a visit from the police. Apparently, a vehicle had been found down the street, only recently abandoned. Recently, as in the last few hours. One neighbor had noticed it while going out for her mail and knew at once that it didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. It was also parked too close to her house for her liking, so she called the police, who came not long after to investigate. They ran the plates, identified its owner, and tried to contact them, but had no luck in doing so. Another set of officers visited the address of the person to which the vehicle had been registered, but no one was home. The police then went around my neighborhood asking if anyone knew the vehicle's owner. As you might have guessed, the vehicle belonged to the locksmith who had unlocked my doors. While they explained the situation to me, I couldn't help but notice a lingering smell issuing from my kitchen. I hadn't yet made coffee, so the smell was unrivaled among the atmosphere of my home. I realized that it had come from the candle. Nothing else in my house smelled like this, and was surprised to find it fairly enjoyable, sweet, and pleasant. It took the officers shouting my name to pull me out of the mild reverie induced by the faint scent of the candle. Not wanting to incriminate myself in the disappearance, assuming he'd just wandered off somewhere, I told the police that I had no idea who the vehicle could have belonged to. They gave me weird looks, but accepted my proclaimed ignorance and moved on to the next house. Once my front door was shut, I nearly sprinted to my kitchen. On the table was the candle's glass holder. However, the wax had been almost fully reduced by the flame. Barely a stain was left. The candle was no longer lit. The wick bent and curled by the melted wax that had solidified around it. Only an echo of the candle's scent persisted, and yet it was incredibly powerful. Standing there in the kitchen, I actually lost time. I was totally bewitched by the smell. Over an hour later, after being shaken from my candle-induced intoxication by my phone's alarm, I went upstairs and began cleaning myself up. As I showered, I couldn't help but feel suddenly and powerfully terrified. Even though the candle's olfactory enchantment had been almost sublime, something about losing myself so easily and totally unsettled me to my core. It was a feeling more intense than any drug, drink, or physical sensation I'd ever experienced. Once finished, I dressed and headed over to my neighbor's house, the one who had provided me with the candle. He answered promptly, undisturbed by my early visit. I greeted him and asked about the candle, telling him about the experience with it after it had burned itself out. He smiled, adjusted his sleeping gown, and said, almost in a whisper, "Burns deliciously intoxicatingly. It could stop a man in his tracks with just one note of its scent. Could ensnare the hardiest of men, and trap the most chaste. At its most potent, it is irresistible. All of the stimuli become a ghost, immaterial, invisible, unheeded. One could do anything to a man ensnared by the candle." As he had done last time, he closed the door on me before I could even think of a response. But before it closed, I saw through the dwindling opening a wall full of candles and paraphernalia of perfumery. And sealed within a lounge chair, unbound but clearly subdued by something, was a man who I recognized as the Locksmith, an expression of deep relaxation upon his face. I just want to point you guys in the direction of the snake's paw. If you guys are listening right now on a podcast, then hey, you're pretty much already there. If you're not listening on the podcast and you're listening on the YouTube, then hey, you're basically already there. The Snake's Paw is written by Jack Townsend, who also happens to write Tales from the Gas Station, and Finding Vanessa, which I've heard that some of you people like. If you want to find some more of his amazing writing, as well as a full cast of voices that is brought to life within this amazing podcast that's hilarious and frightening at the same time, then I strongly suggest you check it out. That's The Snake's Paw, and you can also go to thesnakespaw.com. A big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jakob Fenske, Stephanie Butler, Jordan Humble, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, William Wellington, Emma, Brenna Crow, LaQueda Canizales, Smiley the Psychotic, Dante, Kinkade, SimbasBloodyMojo, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion Beefcake, M, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, Clownable, Amber Clark, Jay Kearns, Dakota Lane Whetstone, Himbo Jerry, Crusader Chocobo, Adamarius, Estebean, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Xylobones, Angelus, Seclude, Salty Surprise, Lebeda Galvin, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Turtleman, Carolinian, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchalk, Dirty Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Pikeamel, Melted Lake, Tolly Sue, William King, Darth Miver, Sashi Suzaku, Coconut 509, Stricket, Freddy Krueger, Lisa Cottrell, Hades Nephew, Acid System, Mog, Kiwi the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. To all of you guys, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you for being a huge support to me. Thank you to everybody who's in the description down below, and thank you to everyone who can even support $1 just on Patreon to help keep the content coming.